So, what do we do as a nation? Do we join in on the side of Britain, a country against whom we had only recently fought a revolution? Do we join in on the side of France, our ally during the revolution, but now a nation that seems very determined to kill off a good portion of their population? What do we do? Do we pick a side? Well, with war, you started to hear a call from the JDRs, the Jeffersonian Democratic Republicans, to enter the war on the side of France. France had been our friend during the revolution. They had supported us in secret at first, and then they had supported us openly. They had sent weapons and stores and ships and men. They had been our only real ally at the outset. And the argument was those were who we needed to support. We needed to support France in their revolution to make sure that their republic would come into existence, survive, and one day we would be good friends. Now, on the other side of the coin, Hamilton leaned toward siding with the Brits because he saw it as being economically advantageous. Okay? Now, we had a great deal of trade going on with Britain at this point in time. A vast majority of our imports and exports dealt with Britain and her colonies. So the argument that we needed to side with the Brits made perfect sense if we wanted the economy to continue to prosper. So you have the arguments going back and forth here between, do we do what is best for the nation in an economic sense, or do we do what is considered the right thing to do by siding with France? Now, Washington understood that war could mean a disaster and disintegration, okay? Because the nation in 1793 was militarily and economically weak. Okay, we did not have a solid foundation for our economy to begin with. Remember, Washington had only been in office for about 4 years at this point in time. The plans and everything that Hamilton had put in place to make us a manufacturing nation had only just begun to be implemented, really. And when it came to the military, the only reason we had been able to stand up against Britain, in all honesty, was the fact that we had assistance from France. Politically speaking, we were not a very united nation. Now, I have said this many times, that this was a point in time where people put their state ahead of their national identity. You were a Virginian first and an American second, or a New Yorker, or a South Carolinian, or whatever. But you put your state ahead of the national government. So we were on shaky grounds economically. We did not have a strong military, and politically, we were not very united. And so in 1793, George Washington made his decision, and it was one that he saw as being the best bet to allow America to essentially survive. Remember, we are a very young nation, and this is going to be a decision that really is going to affect whether or not we continue to exist the way we were at that moment. 1793, he issues the Neutrality Proclamation. He says that the United States officially is going to be neutral. We are not going to side with Britain. We are not going to side with France. We are going to stay out of it. It is not our business. It is not our concern. And we are not going to take sides in this one. In fact, he warns the American people, stay out of the issue and be impartial. The idea is to hopefully not enrage either of the two sides. Washington would later use the phrase, friendship to all, that we could be friends with everybody. And he thought, honestly, that if we didn't pick a side, then maybe we could stay friends with all. Think about it. Many of us have had two friends who get into a fight. And the question then becomes, whose side are you on? And a lot of us would like very much not to have to pick a side. We tend to want to keep both of our friends in that case. Same kind of thing here. We did not want to antagonize either Britain or France. We really wanted to keep both of them as being our friends. We are a very young nation, And we needed all the friends we could possibly get at that point in time, ladies and gentlemen. Now, because of this, the JDRs were furious. They hated the fact that we did not immediately join with France, that we did not immediately side with them to help their revolution to succeed. They argued that it was the moral thing to do, that France had been there to assist us in our moment of need, and now we had the chance to help them in the same kind of struggle. And we failed to do so. So the JDRs, not very happy with this. Okay, it irked really both sides, England and France. So instead of it really doing what Washington wanted and making everybody happy, it did really annoy both sides. Now, shortly after all this, you have an individual by the name of Citizen Edmund Genet. Okay, he arrives in Charleston, South Carolina, as a representative to the United States from France. Now, as Citizen Genet is going through the United States on his trip to Philadelphia, he had been cheered rousingly by the Jeffersonian Democratic Republicans because they supported France. And he came to unfortunately believe that Washington's Neutrality Proclamation did not truly reflect the feelings of Americans. Now, if all you're seeing are the JDRs really celebrating you because you are French and they are on the side of the revolution and they want America to be involved, then you definitely are seeing exactly the feelings of the Jeffersonian Democratic Republicans. It may or may not be the case. This may or may not represent the widespread feelings of the American people. Genet believed that what he was seeing was representative of what the American people felt. Regardless of what President Washington's proclamation said, he believed that, yes, the American people wanted to support France, that they may have had this statement by the president, but it wasn't what people really believed. Now, we look back 200 years later, and we have a tendency to think or to see it that George Washington, father of our country, was beloved by everyone at every moment of his presidency and life. Not siding with France did make different people very upset with President Washington, and they were very willing to express that in newspapers and things like that. So, while yes, there were those very much in favor, there were also going to be those against. But all Genet really saw, and maybe it was because he just saw what he wanted to see. He thought that the Americans were against the Neutrality Proclamation and wanted to side with France. Also, at this time, he equipped privateers. Okay, now privateers is a fancy, polite way to say pirates, essentially. Okay, he is hiring people to go out and plunder British ships, and what's more, to try and invade both Spanish Florida and British Canada. So Citizen Genet is really here stirring up some trouble. He is trying to get people fighting against Britain, trying to get the people on the side of France in an active way, because he honestly believes that's what the people of the United States really wanted. Okay, so he's going through and he is working on all of this, even though it is in direct violation of what President Washington had said. In fact, Citizen Genet went so far as to threaten to appeal over the head of President Washington to the sovereign voters themselves. He basically was threatening Washington by saying, look, you need to support us or I'm going to go over your head. I'm going to talk directly to the people and they will tell you what you need to do, Mr. President. Basically, what Citizen Genet ended up doing was getting himself kicked out of the United States. He had worked very hard to help bring the American people onto the side of France because he thought that's what they wanted to do. But he found out that we were a nation of laws and that we were supposed to be neutral in this. As a result, like I said, he got himself kicked out of the United States, but not before stirring up a great deal of controversy while he was here. In all honesty, though, America's neutrality was more beneficial to France, okay? Because this was the only way that France was going to be able to get American foodstuffs to their Caribbean islands. If the United States had sided with France, while they still would have been trying to get those same supplies to the Caribbean islands, Britain would have slapped a blockade on American ports and done everything in their power to stop all American shipping. So the fact that we were neutral made it easier to get some of these supplies, at least in this situation. Now, even though France was upset that the U.S. did not help them officially, we didn't have to honor an alliance. Okay, we did have a treaty with France from 1778. And if they had asked us officially for help, then that would have been one thing. If we had been asked formally and said no, well, there are implications and repercussions from this. But France never really called upon us to go through and help them in regards to the treaty. So as a result, we technically weren't going through and, not fulfilling our end of the bargain. France had been a great ally during the revolution because it was in their best interest. Okay, they didn't want us to be our own nation or anything like that. That wasn't their main concern. Their main concern was, could this damage Britain? So at that point in time, when we originally became allied with France, we're quite literally looking at a situation where both sides benefited. In this case, only France would have really benefited if we had gone on with the treaty. Now, the lucky part, I guess, is the best way to phrase it. They didn't formally request our assistance, and so therefore we didn't have to actually provide it.